Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale, single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, tally up that score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft, and we'll move on to the next team in this series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer out there, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Falcons next, Dirty Birds next, Atlanta next, Falcons. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Atlanta Falcons. And this was a 7-player draft that at times was head scratching. I'm not going to lie. Essentially, they had a plan in mind. I think their plan got nicked a couple of times throughout this draft. I think there were players on the board that they wanted at specific times, and I think teams either swooped in and took that player, or that guy just came off the board prior to their selection and they had to go to plan B several times in this draft. I don't think it was once. I think it was twice they've had to do this had to do this in this particular draft. It may have been even 3 times, but I think there are 2 spots in this draft where I kind of scratched my head at the selection and said there were other guys available that made more sense at this particular pick. And so I think they had a plan going into the draft. I think they executed that plan for the most part, but there were some positions that I thought could have been addressed. I thought they went overkill at one particular position. We'll talk about all of those things in this draft, but nonetheless, it was a solid haul for the Falcons overall. Let's start their 2019 NFL draft with their first selection. And they had 2 first-rounders. We didn't know at the time they were going to have 2 going into the draft, but they ultimately came back into the first round. But with this first selection, they wanted to solidify the offensive line, and I think they did that with the 14th overall pick. Offensive lineman out of Boston College, Chris Lindstrom, was their pick. So when I look at Chris Lindstrom, here's a guy, 6'4", 308 pounds. And as I said, we're going to get through this very quickly, and I'm going to read you my synopsis on these players. I'll give you my comp for these players, and then I'll give you the grade, and we'll move on to the next player. So Chris Lindstrom is an interesting player, a hard-nosed, tough physical football player. Here's my notes on Chris Lindstrom. Quick and athletic interior offensive lineman that offers versatility at either guard. He had 36 career starts at right guard or even at right tackle in a pinch. He had 11 career starts at right tackle. So there's a little bit of versatility there. A guy with some flexibility, but I think guard is going to be his home at the next level. Not much of a man mover, but his plus athleticism, he ran a 4.91 at the combine, and you see it on tape. You see this guy move and get to the second level with ease. He's a guy that I think will flourish in a zone run blocking scheme, similar to the one the Falcons employ. So allows him to mirror really well in the pass game, his athleticism does. And so he doesn't get beaten a lot with just pure quickness, because he can mirror very well because he's got quick feet and good athleticism and good lateral quickness as well. He pass off, twists, and stunts well, gets to the second level with ease, as I mentioned already. Also does a good job of sealing, or as I like to call, creating a barrier between ball carrier and defender. So again, not going to wow you with his ability to maul people in the run game. That's not what this guy's about. He's not, now, not to say that he's not a physical finisher, but he's not a guy that's going to take a guy and drive him 2.5 yards, 3 yards off the line of scrimmage and create a new line of scrimmage. His thing is more of, he's creating a barrier. He's sealing defenders. He's walling them off from the ball carrier, or as I like to say, creating a barrier between ball carrier and defender. And that's what he does best. He's a guy that's going to try to turn and seal and create a little bit of a gap, a little space that running back can easily cut off of and get to the next level. And he's very durable. Here's a guy that never missed a game at BC, and he was essentially a 4-year starter. Started about a third of the way through his freshman season and didn't look back. And so you're talking about a guy that had about 47 career starts at BC. So again, durability is and availability is the best ability you can have at the next level, and this guy has it in spades. And I was a little shocked by this pick. I'm not gonna lie. I think the Falcons were thrown off a little bit. And again, in the first round, generally, depending on where you pick, you've got a list of guys that you want to select, and there's probably a little bit of a pecking order. And I think the first guy that the Falcons really wanted was the defensive tackle out of Clemson, Christian Wilkins. There's no secret. I think that was one of the worst kept secrets of the first round, that the Falcons were in love with Christian Wilkins and Ed Oliver. And I think if they had it their way, they would have traded up for Ed Oliver. And I mocked that in my mock draft, but that didn't come to fruition. I think they wanted to go up with Detroit and trade up, and I think that fell through. Maybe Detroit was asking for too much, and the Falcons didn't want to give up what they were asking for. Whatever the case may be, they wanted a defensive tackle, I believe, in the first round. I think they wanted an interior defensive tackle that was havoc wreaking and playmaking. And I think the two guys that they wanted at 14 or sooner was Oliver, and you're going to have to go into the top 10 to get him. Or I think it was Christian Wilkins. If they didn't get Oliver, they were perfectly fine with sitting at 14 and waiting for Christian Wilkins to fall into their lap. And what happened was Miami took him a pick before they could get their hands on him at 13. And so, again, I think they had a backup plan. They said, look, the only player we're moving for is Ed Oliver, and the price has to be right. If it's too steep, we'll sit there. If Christian Wilkins falls to us, we'll take him. If he doesn't, then we've got a backup plan, and we'll take Chris Lindstrom, and we'll be just fine with that selection as well. We need interior offensive line help. I didn't think that was the case, though. In the offseason, you go out, you sign Jamon Brown, you go out, you sign James Carpenter. I thought you had figured out what you wanted to do. I thought you were going with this power run scheme, and you were switching things up. And then you go and draft Chris Lindstrom. So that tells me you didn't view both of those guys as starters. I think Jamon Brown is going to get a chance to start. I think you view James Carpenter as a backup. I would as well. But okay, so that's probably what you're going into the 2019 season with the mindset of, is that we've got our offensive line now, and this guy, along with the next guy, is going to complete our offensive line, and it makes a lot of sense. And so with the 14th overall pick, Chris Lindstrom to me is a really good addition to this football team. And I comp him to another guy that went right in this same range about 4 years ago to the Dallas Cowboys out of Notre Dame in Zach Martin. He's got that kind of ability, that kind of athleticism. Zach Martin wasn't a man mover, but he was an athletically gifted interior offensive lineman that we knew was going to get the job done at the next level. Turned out to be a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro. This guy, Chris Lindstrom, has that same type of ability written all over him. And so in the first round, 14th overall selection, BC offensive lineman Chris Lindstrom, for me, is...
Hits one high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
So you move on to the next selection in the draft for the Falcons, their second pick, and they actually move back into the first round, 31st overall. They traded their second and third round selections to the Rams for 31 and a sixth round selection. So this was an important pick. You got to get this one right because of the draft capital you gave up to move up to make this selection. And with that pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Caleb McGarry, offensive tackle out of Washington. So after looking at the offensive line, you see I've got it marked off, and these are the positions that I feel like are positions of need for the Atlanta Falcons, and I put them in order in which I thought they were needs for the Falcons going into this draft. And so offensive line was high on my list, but more specifically, offensive tackle. As I just mentioned, I didn't think guard was necessarily a position of need because of what you did in free agency. So I was kind of shocked that you went that route with the 14th overall pick, but I gave you my rationale as to what I think the Falcons were thinking themselves and why they ultimately settled in on best player available at a position of need. in guard. And so I think that's how they ended up with the selection of Chris Lindstrom. So you take offensive line off the board, but for me, it really comes off the board here at 31 because I think you needed tackle help more than you needed guard help. Like, I really wasn't in love with what you were going to trot out there at tackle for the upcoming season. And so I felt like it was imperative that you did something at the tackle position because I didn't think that the guys you had in place were good enough to get the job done. More specifically, your right tackle position. I think Jake Matthews is just fine, but I think you have an issue at right tackle, and so you needed to do something there. And I think that this selection is your attempt to do something there. I don't necessarily love the pick, though. All right, and for you to come up, for you to give up second and third round selection to make this pick, it better be the right one. I thought there were better players available, but let's get to Caleb McGarry first, and I'll tell you what I think of him. So 6'7", 317, so you're talking about a big mountain of a man here, all right? So I've got down a long, lean offensive tackle that has some athleticism but lacks lateral quickness. So I'm not in love with what this guy brings to the table from a lateral quickness standpoint. What I mean by that is when he gets out of his stance, guys can run by him on the outside off the edge, all right? Power isn't going to affect him. I watched this guy stand up to power enough to feel comfortable in that regard, all right? Even though he doesn't have the longest arms in the world, for his size, you'd expect his arms to be a lot longer than what they are. He's right under 33 inches, which is really poor for a guy his size. You're thinking he's going to have 34-inch arms, 35 at 6'7", but that's not the case. But, okay, fine. Doesn't have long arms, but he's got some athleticism, and you would think he would have had better lateral quickness. But I saw guys be able to run around him, but the thing that always strikes me as odd is that even though he doesn't have long arms, even though his lateral quickness isn't the greatest, he always finds a way to push that guy around the pocket. Now, I'm thinking, if there's an athletically gifted guy with speed that can bend, I saw guys give him problems when they were able to bend the corner. See, if you run upright and you speed around that corner and you initially beat him, he finds a way to get back into the play. And this guy is uber scrappy, and I'll talk about that here in a second. He finds a way to get back into play, but if you can bend, he's 6'7", so he does not want to bend. If you can bend at that 45, that 90-degree angle that we've seen guys like DeMarcus Ware and some of the elite rushers through the years be able to do, bend that corner, he can't bend at 6'7" and get down there. He doesn't want to, and that's when he gets beat, okay? But in any event, he can be beaten around the edge with speed and might have problems with rushers who have the length, only 33-inch arms, as I mentioned before, or who can bend the corner. And that's the thing that I think is going to give him the most problems. But there aren't many pass rushers that have the ability to bend around the corner, so he may be able to avoid that at the next level. We'll see. That being said, there's a toughness to Caleb McGarry that's present. In a mental capacity, his dad was diagnosed with MS, and they lost their family farm when he was in high school. All right, so they were living in an RV. They were going to rebuild his mom's childhood home. They started to do that. That caught on fire, and one of the RVs that they were living in caught on fire. So there was some adversity that hit him in high school. And so there were some things he had to go through that made him a much more mentally tough individual. Teams like that kind of stuff. Not to say that teams want you to suffer hardship, all right? But if you go through hardship, it makes you a much stronger, mentally tougher. You've heard the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so I think teams usually evaluate players in that regard. And if they have some things they've went through and they were able to come out the other side stronger and better because of it, that's an added benefit and a plus. And for a guy like Caleb McGarry, that's a plus for him. Also, there's a physical toughness. He has a heart arrhythmia. And so all that means is that his heart is irregular sometimes. His heartbeat is irregular sometimes. And so this is a guy that, when I say he's a tough guy, this guy is scrappy. He will do whatever it takes to win a rep. I've seen this guy block with elbows, forearms, face masks, body. Doesn't matter. He'll do whatever the hell he's got to do to try to win that particular rep. It's not always pretty, but it's effective. And so I don't have a problem with it. Just do your job. I don't care if it's technically sound. I don't care if it looks pretty or aesthetically pleasing. Just get the job done. And for the most part, that's what Kaleb McGary does. Now, I said, and he's got the capacity to go along with the nastiness that will help him overcome some of his limitations. He's a 4-year starter, started midway through his freshman season at Washington and didn't look back. So just like Chris Lindstrom, another guy with tons of experience, and he's a guy with 47 career starts, just like Chris Lindstrom, 47 career starts, and he's got durability under his belt. So again, these are all things that you love with these two draft picks. However, this guy to me is raw. All right, he was a guy that he started out at a totally different position. This guy was an offensive football player, got to Washington, and ended up converting over to the offensive side of the football, as an offensive lineman. He started out as a defensive lineman. So this is a guy that had to learn the position, had to get stronger. There were a number of things that he had to adjust to, but he made the adjustment. He made it well, as you can see, and he was a rock for Washington along their offensive line at right tackle. So the issue I have with this pick is that I think he may ultimately be a guard in this league. If that lateral quickness issue that I saw on tape at times continues to rear its head, he may have to get kicked inside, which I think will be fine for him. But here's my bigger issue. You traded up to 31 for this pick. You gave up a second and a third, and I felt like there were better offensive tackle prospects on the board at this time. That's just my opinion. Cody Ford was sitting there. I personally am a Dalton Risner fan, and you drafted a right tackle here in Kaleb McGary. Dalton Risner was the best right tackle in this draft, if you ask me. So if you were looking for a right tackle and a guy with versatility, you could have knocked all of those things out with one selection in Dalton Risner out of Kansas State. He could have played right tackle. He could have kicked inside the guard, which is what this guy may ultimately have to do for you. He may be a rock for you at right tackle, but I thought there were better options on the board at 31, and you went with a guy that I thought was someone you could have gotten, or someone that was a second-round prospect to me. So, in any event, you got the guy that you wanted. Obviously, you came back up and you snatched him up in the latter portion of the first round. I don't agree necessarily with the player that you took. I think he's got some potential, but I'm questionable as to whether this guy will succeed at tackle or not at the next level because of his short arms and his lateral quickness that I think he lacks at times. So in any event, I don't love this selection. I think this guy is extremely scrappy. I think there are some things that the Falcons really like about Kaleb McGary. We'll find out if he is the real deal or not. I don't necessarily love this selection, but we'll see how it turns out. In the first round, 31st overall selection, offensive tackle, offensive lineman out of Washington, Kaleb McGary for me is and let me say this. When you're talking Kaleb McGary, think Robert Gallery. And again, I know that's not flattering to most of you. Robert Gallery was a top 5 pick. I think he went second overall to the Raiders. And he turned out to be a guy that had to kick inside the guard. At one point, everyone thought he was a bust. Thought he actually had a quality NFL career after he made the switch to guard. But again, that's what might happen to Kaleb McGary. I see a lot of Robert Gallery in him in the sense that there are limitations to his game that may force him inside. And so we'll see what happens. But if you're going to trade up for a guy, you better get it right. Let's see if the Falcons indeed get it right. But with their next selection, because you traded away your second and your third, we go straight to the 4th round in the 111th pick overall, cornerback out of the Ohio State University, Kendall Sheffield is the selection. So, looking at Kendall Sheffield, I thought this was a big position of need. Let's go ahead and take this one off the board because obviously the offseason, the Falcons decided to go in a different direction with their secondary. Last year, they drafted Isaiah Oliver, a guy that I loved out of Colorado. And so I think he's going to get a chance to play in a much more prominent role this season, in addition to Desmond Trufant, obviously, on the other side. But you moved on from Robert Alford. You also moved on from Brian Poole, who I thought was a really good piece for you in the nickel. So there is a little bit of an overhaul. There's a little bit of a changing of the guard at the cornerback position, and there may be more changes to come in the upcoming years. I think Desmond Trufant is another guy that could easily be moved on from down the road, especially if a guy like Kendall Sheffield and Isaiah Oliver pan out. You could see some younger, cheaper options coming into the fold at the cornerback position, and they really like Kendall Sheffield, and this is a guy with a ton of speed. Let me talk about what I saw with Kendall Sheffield. You're talking about a 5'11", 193-pound corner from Ohio State, which is turning into a bit of a factory at the cornerback position with Marshawn Lattimore, Denzel Ward of note of late. Obviously, there have been other guys that have been misses, like a Eli Apple, for instance. But for the most part, you get a cornerback from Ohio State, they generally pan out and are good, solid football players. Bradley Roby has been extremely solid throughout his NFL career. And so the list goes on and on with these Ohio State corners, and you add Kendall Sheffield to that mix. We're still waiting on Garyon Conley to find out what he's going to be. I actually liked him coming out of Ohio State as well. So there's been a number of talented guys coming out of Ohio State, and add Kendall Sheffield to that mix. He's an undersized boundary corner with the versatility to play inside as a nickel. So let me stop right there. I think they view him as a guy that can play outside. So I think they're going to give him a chance to play outside first. I listened to the press conference after the draft. It sounds like they're going to give him a run outside. I think his value right now for this team as it stands, with you already having two guys that I think can play outside in Trufant and Oliver, I think his best value for you right now is in the nickel. So I'd be shocked if he didn't get a lot of run in the nickel. You saw him play on tape in the nickel. I thought he was fine in the nickel, but he's a guy that I think they're going to give an opportunity to play outside, and if he fares better out there, you may see him outside as a boundary corner. We'll see what happens. Sheffield possesses rare explosion for the position as a quick-twitch 4'3" track athlete. So this is a guy with a big-time track background, was one of the fastest players and fastest guys in the state of Ohio. So this guy's a major track athlete. So the 4'3" doesn't surprise anyone. Despite his size, he's not afraid to mix it up as a tackler. And although he has limited experience, there are some ball skills here. 2 career interceptions, 17 pass breakups over the last 2 years. This is a guy that transferred from Alabama, so you know he's talented, okay? He was at Alabama on a scholarship. He redshirted the first year, didn't like where that situation was going. I don't know if he wasn't going to get the playing time that he was looking for as a redshirt freshman, but whatever the situation may be, he decided to transfer out of there, went to Blinn College for a year as a JUCO student, so he didn't have to sit out a year. Then he transferred over to Ohio State, played 2 years there. Obviously, they had a ton of talent when he first got there, but he got some snaps, but he was the guy on the field last year, and so he's a guy with limited experience, all right, but he was in there, made some plays, got some ball skills, but there are some drawbacks here. There's a reason he's sitting here in the 4th round. I know listening to your GM and your head coach talk, the reason they think he was sitting here is because of injury history. I think he was sitting here because the guy doesn't locate the football. You know how I am about being an LLCer. Look, locate, contest as a cornerback. Let's talk about more of, he drives well on underneath routes, and I really like that about him. He closes very well. You watch him close on in-breaking routes and routes coming back to the football, has no problems using that explosiveness to come back to the football, and will challenge at the line of scrimmage despite his diminutive stature. He's not afraid to come up, delete the airspace, and come into your face and press you at the line of scrimmage. He's not afraid to come up because, and again, I love that because you've got the long distance speed to carry that. If a guy beats you off the line of scrimmage, you should be able to make up any distance that's created off the line of scrimmage with your 4'3" speed. So I love the fact that he's not afraid to come up and challenge guys despite being, because all you're looking to do is disrupt them at the line of scrimmage. And but he refuses to locate the ball in flight. Translation, he's not an LLCer. And you know, if you've been watching me for any amount of time, that is a pet peeve of mine. You've got to locate the football because it's hard to contest when you don't know where the ball is. And too many times I saw him give up passes and give up catches. The Maryland game, the Michigan game, are two games that I cite, that I watch, where there are passes, he's right there. If he looks, he could even pick it off. He refuses to look back for the football. And I don't know if it's out of fear because he thinks if he turns around, he's going to miss the football. I don't know, but he's got to turn around and locate the ball. You can't make plays, and he's got some ball skills. If you can't make plays on the football if you don't locate. And so that's my biggest pet peeve with him. But all the talent is there. And again, he's not going to grow anymore, I don't think. He's 5'11". It is what it is. I think he's more suited for the nickel. That's just my personal preference with him. But I think he's going to get a chance to play out wide. And if he's a boundary corner, if he fares well out there, hey, knock yourself out. You do not have to be 6'1" to be a corner in this league out on the boundary. So we'll see what he does. This is my thing. I look at this guy. If he can develop, and generally when you get to the league, if you're not locating the ball, you're probably not going to change once you get to the league. But we'll see. If he can develop the penchant to look back for the football, you may have something here in the 4th round in Ohio State cornerback Kendall Sheffield. For me, I look at him. He reminds me of another Ohio State cornerback in Bradley Roby, a guy that I wasn't all that high on when he came out into the draft. He turned out to be a really quality NFL corner. The Broncos didn't think high enough of him to extend him after his rookie deal was up. He's now in Houston, but he's been a solid corner throughout his career. I didn't love his ball skills, and again, he was another guy that didn't locate the football coming out of college, and so that's why I wasn't as high on Bradley Roby. But similar traits here, similar athlete, similar size, and a guy that not afraid to mix it up and make tackles. You see a lot of the same qualities here in Kendall Sheffield that I saw in Bradley Roby. Here in the 4th round, 111th overall selection. This was close to a triple, but I just couldn't, because he didn't look for the football, so you already know. You already know what this is. Kendall Sheffield, for me, is. So we move on to the next pick in the draft, and the Falcons doubled up in the 4th round and had another 4th round selection. This time, 135th pick overall. They go small school here with a Charleston out of West Virginia, by way of West Virginia pick on the defensive line in John Comiskey. So John Comiskey is really, really interesting for me. So let's first knock off John Comiskey's position, which is defensive line. They drafted him, and he's technically an edge rusher. I think that they have plans to beef him up, get him to, because he came into the combine at 286. I think they're going to try to beef him up to about 295, 296, somewhere in there. And I think he's going to end up being an interior defensive lineman. They like his versatility. Listen to them talk about him and what he brings to the table. And I think they love the fact that he can play and or defensive tackle. I think, that his position at the next level is going to be defensive tackle. I don't see him being a productive defensive end at the next level. But again, we will see. Here's what I was able to gather on John Comiskey, watching him prior to the draft. So this Division II prospect looks the part. I mean, when I seen him at the combine, he caught my eye at the combine running a 4.69 40 with a 1.62 10-second split, which is phenomenal for a guy. Remember, we're talking about a guy that's 286 pounds running a 4.69 and a 1.62 10-second split. That is insane. If you remember my combine coverage, I talked about this guy and I said, that was impressive. I've got work to do. And so he looks the part. The movement skills were off the charts at the combine. And then you watch him dominate versus teams like Shepherd and Glenville State. Those were the two games that I watched. And what you see is brute strength, first and foremost. He was ragdolling those guys. He was dominating at the point of attack. But it's Glenville State and it's Shepherd, all right? These are the schools he's playing against, all right? He's playing against Notre Dame College, not Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, Notre Dame College out of Ohio. Like, these are the teams he's playing against. So keep this in mind, all right? But nonetheless, there were two things that I saw. A guy that could win with strength, and then he had a quick inside rip move. These are the two things that I think he does really well. And he doesn't have much more in his move Rolodex, so he's extremely raw. Here's the thing. This guy came to Charleston by way of West Virginia as a quarterback. All right? He was an option quarterback and 218 pounds. And when he got there, they was like, no, you're a defensive end. And so he had to sit out a year. He had the red shirt. He ate a bunch of pizza. All right, he said the only thing he could really afford to help him gain weight was Little Caesars. So he loaded up on Little Caesars pizza. He gained a ton of weight, got up to 280 pounds, and he started as a redshirt freshman, essentially, and he didn't look back. And he grew, and as he got more comfortable with the position, by his junior year, he started to really dominate. And then the senior year, he jumped on the radar of the scouts, ended up landing at the Senior Bowl. I thought he fared well at the Senior Bowl. And when I watched him at the Senior Bowl and I watched him at the Senior Bowl, I didn't like him at defensive end. I didn't think he was impactful at defensive end. When they kicked him inside to the 3-tech, that's when he started creating problems. That's when he started collapsing the pocket. That's when he started getting his hands on footballs and making the quarterback uncomfortable. That's why I think his position, excuse me, at the next level is defensive tackle. I think he's a 3-tech. But nonetheless, as Kaminsky, to me, is a work in progress. He started out as a 218-pound high school quarterback. So this guy is continuing to grow at the position. There's still a lot he has to learn. I know that Dan Quinn is going to relish getting his hands on a guy like this. I see that there's potential here, but I also see that there is a glass ceiling. Like, I don't see this guy turning into Calais Campbell or anything like that. But there is a place for him in the league. There is a role that he can carve out for himself. This isn't what the Falcons envisioned when they looked to address defensive tackle. They were looking for a much more splashy, flashy, dominant player in the first round, but that opportunity didn't come their way. And so they went in a different direction. And by the time they were able to circle back, because they gave up a second, they gave up a third, all the guys of note were gone. And so this is what they had to settle in on. And he gives you some versatility because he can play defensive end. But again, I thought you needed edge rusher help, like a true, because I told you 2 years ago, I wasn't a huge Tack McKinley fan. I told you he was raw. I told you he was an athletically gifted guy with no moves. I haven't seen him adjust at the next level. Vic Beasley has fallen off of a cliff. And so I don't know if he'll ever return. We'll see what he does this season, but I don't think you have a true havoc-wreaking, fear-inducing pass rusher, and John Kaminsky isn't that either. So, in my mind, I look at him. He reminds me a ton of Margus Hunt. I don't know if you guys remember Margus Hunt. He played at SMU. He was drafted by the Bengals about 4 or 5 years ago. A huge mountain of a man. Guys like 6'8", 300 pounds or so, somewhere in there. I think he was 6'8", like 300 pounds. Blocked a ton of field goals and was a massive project coming into the league. He was a defensive end when he was drafted. He ended up moving on to Indianapolis after his rookie deal. And last year, he had a breakout season for the Colts. They read up on Margus Hunt. They moved him inside to defensive tackle, and that's when he started to flourish in Indianapolis. And I think that's where you're going to end up with John Kaminsky. I think that's what's going to end up happening to him. He's going to start at defensive end. They're going to realize he's a much better defensive tackle. They're going to kick him inside, and that's when he's going to play his best brand of football. Because right now, I see a guy that simply collapses the pocket and not much else. I'd like to see him use his athleticism more, but he's just not at that stage right now where he's a good enough player to where he can utilize his athleticism to his best abilities. But maybe that'll come down the line. Right now, I see him as a Margus Hunt type of football player, and we'll see if he develops. Maybe he will turn into a Calais Campbell. I just don't see it happening. But nonetheless, in the 4th round, 135th pick overall, defensive lineman out of Charleston by way of West Virginia, John Kaminsky, for me, is all right. So moving on to the next pick in the 5th round. This was a bit of a head scratcher here. I didn't think you needed another running back. I thought the running back room was good already as it was. I thought that you brought back Brian Hill, a guy that I liked out of Wyoming that you drafted in the 5th round a couple of years ago. I thought that you saw what Ito Smith brought to the table last year. I thought you liked Ito Smith and his production that you got. You're going to get your workhorse back this year, back from injury. And so I thought you added Kenyon Barner in the offseason. I just thought you were fine. You also added another guy out of Michigan State that I think has some talent in Langford. And so in Jeremy Langford. So I just felt like there was enough stuff at running back. You didn't need more. But I guess competition is always great. And so in the 5th round, 152nd pick overall, the Atlanta Falcons select running back Qadree Ollison out of Pitt. So Qadree Ollison is a guy that I watched a ton. We get a ton of Pitt football around here. They're almost local, okay? Pennsylvania is so close that we got a ton of Pitt football. ACC football around here is massive. And so Pitt Panthers were on the tube all the time. And so I saw a ton of Qadree Ollison throughout his career. And I didn't think he was a guy that I didn't think he was going to get drafted. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought there were a number. This is a pick that I questioned. I told you there were 2 picks that I questioned in this draft. This was one of them. I thought this was where you should have selected a wide receiver. And I really think that you need wide receiver help. I'm not going to lie to you. I look at your wide receiver group. I'm not impressed. I think it's very thin. God forbid something happened to Julio or something happened to check 1 2 1 2. Guess who? Mohamed Sanu. And to think there were actually trade rumors surrounding Mohamed Sanu this offseason. Can you believe that? If somebody thought it was a good idea to trade Mohamed Sanu, they need to wash their face and get their mind right because there's not a ton at receiver. Obviously, you've got Calvin Ridley, you've got Mohamed Sanu, and you've got Julio Jones. After that, I've been really disappointed with the East Carolina wide receiver that I think you just re-signed to a 1-year deal or whatever. I've been really, really disappointed in him. I thought he was going to be much better than what he turned out to be. And so you had Russell Gage last year out of LSU. To me, not really, truly a real wide receiver. And so, and you were looking to replace the Marvin Halls and all of those guys of the world, those smaller, diminutive guys with speed that you've had over the years. And I don't think Russell Gage is that guy. And so I don't love your receiver position after the first 3 guys. And so I thought this was a chance to add some depth at receiver. And you missed the ball. You missed the boat here by drafting another running back. And I don't think you need another running back. But that's besides the point. You drafted him. Let's talk about him. Big physical back that runs with violence and has a little bit of juice. A lot more juice than you think. All right, that's the thing that I think people are really taken aback by when you look at Ollison run the football, because you look at this guy, he's a massive 6'1", 230. He's a big back. So you're thinking, okay, he's a plotter. He's probably running a 4.65. Guy ran a sub 4.6, a 4.59 to be exact, or 4.58, 4.58. Guy can run. And you see a little bit of that burst. I watched him against Clemson. You watch him against Penn State. I watched him against Syracuse. There's some bursts. There was a run against Clemson down the sideline. You're like, oh shit, look at Ollison go. There's another run against Syracuse where he hits this extra gear and they can't catch him. Guy has the angle and probably faster than him, dives at his ankle. He's able to keep his balance. He couldn't catch him. So there's a little bit more juice and burst there with Qadree Ollison than you give him credit for. But when you watch him, you're a little surprised at what this guy brings to the table. That being said, he's physical with or without the football. That's something else that I really do like. With the football, he gets ahead of steam. He's a tough guy to bring down. I've seen him drag defenders. I've seen him run through arm tackles. He's got tremendous contact balance. I'll talk about that here in a second. But and he can catch the football too. So not to mention, I talked about with or without the football. This is a guy that he sacrificed for the team. He switched to fullback for a little bit there. in the sophomore, junior seasons, especially when Connor came back back in 16. And so he made, or 17, excuse me, he made the transition. And this was a guy that really did some good things for them as a fullback. And when asked to block, they did a lot of jet sweeps and some things where he had to get out as a lead blocker. And he did some good things, and he can pass pro. So there's some things to like here with Quadri Olesen. Also, he can catch the football out of the backfield. You know, he's got some solid hands, and they threw it to him a ton at Pitt. So there's some things to like here. However, he's not elusive. All right, he's not a BYOB guy. Be your old blocker. Okay, if there's early penetration on the play, he's done. In order for him to maximize his toughness and his ability to break tackles and his contact balance, to tap into that, he needs space to operate. He needs to get going first. All right, sort of like a Derrick Henry. You get him before he starts going, you got him. He starts going, now you got a problem on your hands. But once he gets going, he's excellent, and he has tremendous contact balance, as I mentioned. Contact balance is one of those things that I think goes really under the radar with backs. People don't talk about it enough. For me, it's one of the biggest qualities you can have as a back, because you're going to get hit. But as a back, you got to find a way to stay on your feet. You can't be brought down by every single shoestring and arm tackle out there, or you're not going to get yards at the contact, and you're not going to be the most productive back you can be. Alvin Kamara is probably one of the best backs in the league. Why? Because of his contact balance. And that's what I noticed early on in the process, and why I thought he was a first-round back and told anybody that would listen 3 years ago. Nonetheless, and he's got great awareness in short yardage situations. I can't tell you how many times it's 4th and 1. He initially is stopped, stretches the football across the line to gain, or he's down by the goal line. He initially is stopped at the 1, and then he stretches the football over the plane for a touchdown. He's got great awareness in short yardage situations, even when he stopped prior to the line to gain. Other backs were available that I thought were better. Travion Williams out of Texas A&M, Dexter Williams out of Notre Dame, and even Rodney Anderson. You may not have wanted to go the injury route, a guy coming off of a major injury, and Rodney Anderson has had a plethora of major injuries throughout his career, but the guy is an uber talented back. You're talking about second-round talent, most likely, if not for all the injuries. He's sitting here for you to take in the 5th round. I would have taken a 5th-round flyer at this point because the upside is massive with a guy like Rodney Anderson. But Travion Williams, to me, would have fit the Atlanta Falcons running back profile a lot better. But maybe you were looking for a bigger, physical, more sturdy back. You don't really have one of those on your roster. I thought Brian Hill could have been that for you. He's a big back, 6'1", 215 pounds. Maybe you were looking for more of a 230-pound, bowling ball type of back. You don't have that guy on the roster, and maybe that's why you selected Quadri Olesen, and maybe that's what you were looking for. And if that's the case, I can't be mad at that. You felt like you were missing that short yardage guy, and he can provide that for you. But I just thought there were other positions, and if you're going to take a back, there were other ones that were better here in the 5th round at 152. But I thought wide receiver was a bigger need. But it's hard to not like Quadri Olesen, man. It's really hard to not like him. Okay, I don't have a problem with the player. I just thought there were other players available that were better. And I thought there was a bigger position of need in the 5th round. But okay, you took Quadri Olesen. It is what it is. He's a solid football player. Like I said, he's hard not to like. And I'd be shocked if he didn't make this roster, because you don't have another back on the roster that looks like Quadri Olesen. That being said, in the 5th round, 152nd pick overall, Pitt running back Quadri Olesen for me is and the comp I have for him is James Conner. He looks a lot like James Conner. James Conner, 6'1", 230 pounds. James Conner went to Pitt, similar profile. One of those guys that has to get going. The only difference with James Conner between the two backs is because Conner has a little bit of a burst too. He's not the fastest guy. As a matter of fact, Olesen is faster than James Conner. But the only difference is Conner has the ability to make people miss. We saw that last year in Pitt with the Steelers. He has the ability to make people miss, but both of them can catch it out of the backfield. Both of these guys are very versatile. And so I see a lot of James Conner in Quadri Olison. And if he turns out to be anything like what Conner was for the Steelers last year, you might have gotten yourself a steal in the 5th round. We'll see. In any event, your final 2 picks in this draft were interesting. We go to the 5th round once again, 172nd pick overall. A cornerback out of Washington, Jordan Miller, is the selection. So 6'1", 186 pounds stands Jordan Miller out of UW. Another factory for defensive backs, safeties, corners. We've seen a ton of these guys come into the league. Marcus Peters comes to mind. Sidney Jones, another guy at the cornerback position. We saw Kevin King come off the board a couple of years ago. So Washington, much like Ohio State, they've been a factory for corners over the last 5 years or so. And this is another guy you add to the list. There's a lot to like here with Jordan Miller. There's also some things that you question with him, but that's why he's a 5th round pick, obviously. If there weren't as many question marks, he would have come off the board a lot sooner. So here's my synopsis of Jordan Miller. Tall, rangy, athletic corner that flashes the type of aggressiveness that gets defensive coaches excited. The first thing that jumped off the screen at me with this dude was the fact that he's rail thin, all right? As a matter of fact, he presses, he plays man, he plays cover 3, he plays off. Despite being rail thin, he's an aggressive corner in run support. Let me stop right there because all that ties into what got me excited about him watching on tape. The first thing that I saw that jumped off at me is, whoa, this guy isn't afraid to jump in there in run support. He is uber aggressive. You'd think that this guy was 205 pounds the way that he attacks in the run game. He's not afraid to go and mix it up. He wants to be a part of the action. There are 2 or 3 guys. Generally, you can tell when a corner wants no smoke in terms of tackling because if one guy already has a ball carrier wrapped up, they'll stand around and watch like, oh, yeah, he got it. Or if 2 defenders are already there, they're like, all right, yeah, I got it. I'm going to just chill back here. This guy's like, nah, I want a piece of this tackle. He's going in there and throwing his shoulder around. I'm like, bruh, they got him already. He's like, nah, I just want to make sure. So you can see a guy, they're running a reverse to his side, and he's already in the backfield, cutting a dude down for a 3-yard loss. And I'm like, oh, shit. This dude wants all of the smoke. Like, he's not afraid to go in there and mix it up. He's making tackles. So I love that right off the bat. He's aggressive in that way, and you see it when he comes up to the line of scrimmage. He's looking to aggressively chuck you at the line. He didn't just want to lay hands on you. He didn't want to just disrupt. He wants to F you up at the line of scrimmage. And again, that aggression can also come back to bite him in the ass because he can be over aggressive. And we'll get to that a little bit later on. But again, you hear coaches say this all the time, and I am one that feels the exact same way. Give me the guy that if you're going to make a mistake, he's making it aggressively 110 miles an hour. Give me that guy. I can work with that guy. All right. Give me the guy that is a damn crazed animal. All right. A wise man once said and told me, hey, I'd much rather have a guy that I've got to calm down than a guy that's a corpse that I got to try to bring to life. I can't say it any better than that. Give me the guy that's running around the field like a damn chicken with his head cut off, like his hair's on fire. Give me that guy over the guy that's out there ho-hum, that seems to be sleepwalking on the field like he's hot, like he's about to fall asleep and just drunk NyQuil. I don't want that guy. I want the guy that I've got to calm down and refocus. The guy that's on Ritalin. I want him, not the guy that's on downers. All right, so this is a guy that just plays the game with a ton of energy. Love that about him. All right. Also, I said where he struggles, though, is in instincts and closing on the football. Now, there's plenty of talent here, but there's work that needs to be done as well. That's why he's sitting here in the 5th round. So my biggest issue with him is that he lacks instincts. There are so many times where he's in the play, and I'll give you an example. Quarterback, they're running a boot out to the left side, and he's at the left cornerback position out on the boundary. And the receiver is running a comeback towards the sideline, and he's making himself available to the quarterback. And he's in cover 3, and he's got eyes on the quarterback. He sees what's happening. He sees what the receiver is doing, and he's kind of just waiting. And instincts tells you, Go drive on this football. Don't allow him to go back towards the sideline and pick up a gain of 9 and then step out of bounds easily, uncontested. Go drive on this football. Take him away. Make the quarterback turn him down. He's just kind of sitting there waiting and almost like, I don't want to get beat deep, but there's nothing over the top. There's no threat to you on your side of the field that should make you carry deep. Come back to the football. He's lacking that instincts. There's times where guys are running in-breaking routes or guys are running out-breaking routes or they're coming back to the ball, and he's just slow to transition back to the football. Again, he lacks those instincts that I think are what is essential to be a ball-hawking, playmaking defensive back. He's got all the traits. He's a 4'9" guy at 6'1" with 33-inch arms. He's dripping with the measurables and the talent that is necessary, but I think he's just missing some of the key ingredients that make a Pro Bowl corner. And so, again, time reveals all. And maybe with time and proper coaching, this guy could turn into something. I like what I see. I told you the aggressiveness gets me excited. But he doesn't always locate the football. I saw him pick up a PI where he just was in no man's land, refused to turn around, similar to Kendall Sheffield, where he just panics. So there's some things to work with, but there's some things to work on. So in essence, you've got another guy that you throw in the mix at the cornerback position, and if he sticks, great. If he doesn't, it was a 5th-round pick. We'll see what happens, but there's no denying that this guy has talent, and I'm anxious to see what happens with him because I love the way that he plays aggressively. And again, aggressiveness usually is endearing to coaches, and that usually gets you a spot on the roster, and if nothing else, he plays the game aggressively. So in the 5th round, 172nd pick overall, cornerback out of Washington, Jordan Miller for me is and when I look at Jordan Miller, to me, he reminds me of Dre Kirkpatrick of the Cincinnati Bengals. The cornerback out of Alabama has played really well for Cincinnati at times. Long, rangy corner that's kind of thin, not afraid to come up and get involved in the run game. Dre Kirkpatrick makes plays on the football, and he's best when his eyes are on the quarterback. I think Jordan Miller could be a little bit of the same. But again, he's got to have more instincts. Dre Kirkpatrick has instincts, and that's what Jordan Miller is currently lacking. Final pick of this draft in the 6th round was an interesting one. And then I listened to them talk about this pick, and that made me scratch my head even further. Now, I like the player, but I don't necessarily know if they know what the hell they're going to do with him at this point. But that's nor here nor there in the 6th round, 203rd overall pick. Marcus Green out of Louisiana Monroe, an athlete, is the selection. So I called Marcus Green an athlete for a reason. Here's a guy, 5'8", 190, 4'3", 940, 39-inch vert. The dude is a super athlete. You can see it when you watch him. It's very apparent very early on. This guy was a punt returner. He's a kickoff returner, a phenomenal kickoff return, man. Reminds me a lot of Tony Pollard, who came out in this draft. To me, him and Tony Pollard are eerily similar in what they bring to the table. The running back out of Memphis that the Dallas Cowboys selected. Tony Pollard left the NCAA as the all-time leading kick return touchdown getter with 7 in his career. Marcus Green wasn't that far behind. I watched him return at least 4 kickoffs for touchdowns on tape. So this guy's dynamic in that regard. But much like Pollard, played running back, also doubled as a slot guy, can do a lot of different things. So you see a lot of those same similarities, but Pollard is 6 feet, like 200 pounds, and Marcus Green is 5'8", 190. So that's where the similarities end in terms of all of that versatility and the things that they bring to the table. They're two different players. Tony Pollard is a 4'5", 40 guy, probably more along the lines of 4'8". This guy's 4'3", so there's a much different dynamic here in terms of speed. But nonetheless, I listened to them talk in their post-draft presser, and Dimitroff and company are talking about this guy as a running back. And I'm like, No, that's, again, you just drafted a running back in the 5th round. You already have 27 running backs on the roster. What are we doing here? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the Falcons a favor, all right? They say they're going to start him at running back. He's not going to be a running back for you. I'm going to go ahead and give you credit for a wide receiver here. Now, I would have taken a different wide receiver in the 5th round. I would have taken a different wide receiver in the 6th round, all right, here. But if you're going to take this guy who's an uber athlete, and I just think he's an athlete at this point. He's a positionless athlete, but I think he can be a receiver. I saw him play in the slot. He's got some work to do as a slot receiver, but there's enough here. I saw him run enough routes to feel comfortable that he can win as a slot guy. And I think that he can do a number of different things, and you can use him in that Tavon Austin role where he's playing running back, and that Percival Harvin role, running back, slot guy, punt returner, kickoff returner, whatever you need, gadget guy, because Russell Gage isn't that guy for you. You drafted him to be that, omnipresent, do-it-all type of guy like he was at LSU. Russell Gage isn't that guy. So let's move on from Russell Gage and get you some better stuff. Let me upgrade you. Okay, right here, I'm doing it with Marcus Green. I'm upgrading you. All right, so this guy can play running back, but he's not a running back. He's more of a slot. You don't need another running back. Ito Smith can do everything this guy does out of the backfield. All right, now Ito Smith isn't 4.39, but we saw Ito Smith do some good things last year. So we don't need another back. You just drafted Olsen. You don't need another back. You got a ton of those dudes. All right, and I know that over the years, Devontae Free has been banged up. I get it. So you just want to make sure that you don't find yourself in a quandary if he decides to get hurt again next year. But you don't need another back. So we're going to just make this guy a receiver. He's going to return kicks. He's going to return punts most likely for you. And he can be dynamic. He's going to make your football team. I'm just telling you right now. Marcus Green is invaluable because of all of the different positions he plays. Let me just read you this quick little synopsis I have. He's a chess piece player that brings versatility and speed to the table. Low center of gravity makes him tough to bring down, and his versatility and explosion will make him hard to cut. So I envision him making your football team. I watched this guy bouncing around, just bouncing around on a kickoff return. He bounces off of 2 different tackle attempts, and he takes off for a 95-yard touchdown on a kickoff return. He's got speed to burn. He beats angles. If he wins on a slant, he's gone. Watched him win on some seam routes where he just smoked guys. Watched him win on some out routes in some third down situations. So this is a guy that I think there's some stuff to work with here. You can play him in the backfield. Again, this league is all about mismatches and creating mismatches and creating situations where your guy can win in an advantageous situation. And that's what Marcus Green brings to the table. And so the Falcons have struggled in that regard at times, especially when they get in the red zone, and they lack creativity at times. This guy kind of eliminates that. You don't have to really think. You just put him on the field, you move him around, he's going to win. And he brings an element of speed that you lack. You lack at times. And so now you add him to the mix at receiver. I think that's where his best position is going to ultimately be. Forget about all that running back talk, and you allow this guy to help you on specials, and I think he's going to have an impact early and potentially often on this roster in 2019 and potentially beyond. Like what he brings to the table. We'll see what capacity he's used in Atlanta, but I fully expect this guy to make the roster. So in the 6th round, 203rd pick overall, athlete / wide receiver. Let's call him a wide receiver, all right? He's an athlete, though, but let's call him wide receiver. Out of Louisiana Monroe, Marcus Green for me is so. Let's adjust this here. So for me, I look at this draft, and as I mentioned before, let's look at these positions. I think you attacked every position that was necessary to attack in this draft, other than edge rusher. That's the one position that I thought you needed to address in this draft, and you didn't. And I thought you had an opportunity to do so. When you came back into the first round, you could have done it there. But you needed to address tackle. I just thought you picked the wrong one. But if you're going to give up your second and your third round pick, I thought there were still guys available in the fourth round at the time of your selection that could have helped you at defensive line. I thought you were okay at defensive tackle, which is what I think you ultimately drafted in the fourth round in John Kaminsky. I felt like if you weren't going to get something elite in the form of Ed Oliver or Christian Wilkins, then you needed to go edge rusher. And I know you spent some assets along your defensive line at edge rusher over the years in the first round in Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley, but I don't think it's enough. And I know you got back Dirty Dreads, and that's fine. But he had 1 6-sack game, Claiborne did. That's it. Like, I know you don't think he is the end-all, be-all. So I just felt like you missed an opportunity there. I felt like you could have drafted a receiver in the fifth round. I think you overdid it at the running back position. But, again, we will see how all of this plays out. This is my grade, though, for this Falcons draft. So, essentially for me, I look at this draft by the Atlanta Falcons, and I think it was a quality draft. I think you heard them preach competition, speed, athleticism, and versatility, and that's essentially what you got. I think two of your biggest needs were addressed in this draft. Cornerback, after the offseason you had where you lost some guys, and offensive line. I think Matt Ryan was not protected well enough last year. I don't think the run game was as effective as it could have been. And I think you got better in the offseason with some of the moves you made from a depth perspective. And then you added in more depth, more competition along the offensive line. And so I think the offensive line, you're going to put the best 5 guys out on the football field. And I think the cornerback position, I think you got better. And I'm an Isaiah Oliver guy, and I think he's going to flourish when given the opportunity. And so we'll see what these corners do. I thought that you needed to attack receiver, and you didn't. I thought there were some options available in this draft. You talking about moving on from Mohamed Sanu? There was a Mohamed Sanu clone in this draft named Kelvin Harmon that you could have gotten in the 5th round. Like, there were opportunities for you to make some moves that I thought could have really benefited you moving forward, but you decided to go heavy on running back. And if you ask the Falcons brass, you drafted 2 running backs. I think you drafted 1. I didn't think you needed to draft any. So no edge rusher. I thought you could have used a little bit of help there. Another guy to throw in the mix in that rotation. But because I don't think Vic Beasley is going to be back after this year. I don't. We'll see. I think this is the 4th years we're going into of Vic Beasley. I think we're going into now. And I don't know what you're going to get. We'll see. We'll see. That's all I can say. So, in any event, that's the Falcons draft. I'm your man, Louie Tee. Thank you for joining me. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage. It could be. Plenty more of these where this one came from. So make sure you subscribe to Louie Tee Network. Turn on your notifications because we're going to be talking a lot of Falcons and all the other teams in the league. As we get closer to the season, we'll start breaking down these divisions and each individual team and what the prospects and outlook for their seasons are. So stay tuned to the Louie Tee Network, man. Lots of great content coming your way. Check out the Louie Tee Network podcast. That's available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts. It's also available on TuneIn and Spotify, and of course the website louieteenetwork.net. So there's no excuses. There's a ton of content for you to consume. And so with that being said, I'm your man Louie Tee. See you next time. Have a good one.
Louie